There's a spec sheet sitting in front of me for the brand new 2026 Toyota HiLux. The new one. The one Toyota just launched in December with the fresh face and the bigger screen, and the price that went up as much as $10,000 on some variants. And right in the middle of that spec sheet is a number I want you to look at. 500 Newton meters, that's the torque figure. Now here's the thing about that number. It's the same number that was on the spec sheet in 2015. 11 years. Same engine, the 2.8 litre four-cylinder diesel, same 150 kilowatts, same 500 Newton meters, and every year the price ticks up and the number stays exactly where it is. The base Hilux now starts at $33,998 before on-roads, and that's over $6,000 more than the old entry model. For the same engine your neighbour bought a decade ago, and the Ranger isn't much better. The volume-selling 2.0 litre bi-turbo makes 154 kilowatts, and you guessed it, 500 Newton meters. Meanwhile, there's a Ute landing in Australian showrooms next month, priced under $50,000, that makes 360 kilowatts and over 1,000 Newton meters of torque, more than double the Hilux. For less money than a mid-spec SR, I've spent enough years around diesels to know a spec sheet doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't tell you what breaks, what holds its value, or whether the dealer answers the phone in 5 years. We'll get to all of that because I'm not going to lie to you about any of it. But the raw numbers have never looked like this before, and pretending otherwise is how you end up paying a premium for 2015 engineering. So today I'm walking you through 7 new four-wheel drive Utes that, on paper and in some cases on the road, make the Hilux and the Ranger look genuinely underdone. And near the end, I'll show you the part that should actually bother you, which is who's counting on you never doing this comparison at all. Stay for that bit because that's where your money is. Quick bit of groundwork first, so the rest of this makes sense. The Australian Ute market just went through the biggest shakeup it's had in my lifetime. 12 new entrants landed in roughly 2 years. Kia built its first Ute. BYD, MG, Foton, JAC, GWM, LDV all showed up or doubled down. And the sales numbers tell you buyers noticed, because the segment barely grew while all those newcomers carved out their slice, which means every sale they won came off somebody established. The two benchmarks everyone is shooting at are the Hilux, in 150 kilowatts and 500 Newton meters from a 2.8 diesel, and the Ranger, 154 and 500 from the bi-turbo 4, or 184 kilowatts and 600 Newton meters if you pay for the V6. Hold those numbers in your head. Every Ute on this list either matches them for a lot less money or embarrasses them completely. Let's go. Number 7. The Foton Tunland V9. Now, I'll be honest with you, straight away, this one doesn't make the list on engine numbers, because its engine numbers are modest. What it makes the list on is sheer physical presence and what you pay for it. The Tunland V9 is 5.5 meters plus of Ute, styled like somebody parked an F-150 and a Ram 1500 next to the design studio and said make it look like those. It's longer than a Ranger, wider than a Hilux, and it wears its chrome like a full-size American pickup. Under the bonnet is a 2.0 litre turbo diesel with a 48-volt mild hybrid system, making 120 kilowatts and 450 Newton meters. That's less than the Hilux, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's why it belongs here. It's built on a proper body-on-frame ladder chassis. It meets Euro 6 emissions, and it lands at a price point where the equivalent Hilux or Ranger money buys you a smaller, plainer, older-feeling truck. The cabin is the shock. People climb into this thing expecting a cheap work truck interior and find big screens, decent materials, and a level of finish that makes a workmate feel like a rental. And Foton isn't some pop-up brand either. This is a company that's been building trucks in China since the 90s and used to bolt Cummins diesels into the old Tunland. And that 48-volt system is worth a sentence because people wave it off as marketing. What it actually does is take the load of the stop-start and the electrical accessories off the engine, smooth out the takeoff, and shave the fuel bill at the lights, which is where a heavy diesel drinks worst. It's the cheapest, simplest form of electrification there is. No plug, no big battery, nothing exotic to fail. Just a bigger alternator that occasionally pushes instead of pulls. Where the Hilux and Ranger look weak next to it is simple. Size per dollar, cabin per dollar, presence per dollar. If your Ute is a family truck and a towing platform more than a fire trail weapon, the value equation here is brutal. The caveat, and I'll give you the caveat on every single one of these, is a young dealer network and a resale story nobody can tell you yet, because the truck hasn't been here long enough to have one. So treat the Tunland as what it is: the most metal you can buy for the money, from a brand that's still earning its stripes on your side of the counter. Number 6, the LDV Terron 9. This is where the engine numbers start doing the talking. The Terron 9 runs a 2.5-litre four-cylinder turbo diesel, making 163 kilowatts and 520 newton meters through a ZF 8-speed automatic. Read those numbers again. That's 13 kilowatts and 20 newton meters more than the brand new HiLux. And it beats the Ranger bi-turbo too, from a four-cylinder diesel that at launch was claimed to be the most powerful in its class. It tows the full 3,500 kilos braked. It carries a genuine 1-ton payload. It's got a rear diff lock, low range, proper terrain modes, dual 12.3-inch screens, and a 360-degree camera. And here's the number that matters most. It's priced from around $52,674 drive away, dropping to $49,990 drive away if you've got an ABN. Drive away. A HiLux SR 404, the working grade truck with the older, less powerful engine, starts at $52,990 before you've paid a cent of on-road costs. So the Terron 9 gives you more power, more torque, the same towing, the same payload, a bigger body, and a fancier cabin for thousands less in real money. And LDV backs it with a 7-year, 200,000-kilometer warranty. Toyota gives you 5 years. Now let's talk about how a 2.5-litre 4 makes those numbers, because it isn't magic. It's a modern common rail diesel breathing through an efficient turbo setup, delivering that 520 newton meters in a fat band from 1,500 to 2,500 RPM, which is exactly where a loaded Ute lives, and it feeds a ZF 8-speed, the same family of gearbox the Germans put behind engines twice this size. 8 ratios means the engine sits in that torque band almost all the time instead of falling off it between gears the way an older 6-speed does. That's why it feels stronger on the road than the paper gap suggests. The old mechanics had a saying about torque, that you can't beat cubic money, and for decades the answer to more grunt was pay more. LDV just broke that rule. The honest caveat is the same family caveat as the rest of the newcomers. The engine is new, and a new engine has no history. Nobody, including LDV, knows what this driveline looks like at 300,000 Ks, because no one's been there yet. That warranty is long precisely because it has to be. Number 5, the MG U9. Now, if you looked at the Terron 9 and thought that's tempting, but it rides like a work truck, MG heard you, because the U9 is the same truck underneath, built by the same parent company, SAIC, on the same platform with the same 2.5-litre diesel, this time tuned to 160 kilowatts, and the same 520 newton meters, same ZF 8-speed, with a Borg-Warner 4-wheel drive system, low range, and a rear diff lock on every variant. But MG made one change that matters more than any badge, and it's under the tray. They threw out the leaf springs. The U9 runs a multi-link, coil-sprung independent rear end, front double wishbones, the sort of suspension you find under wagons and American half-tonners, and yet it still claims the full 3,500 kilo braked towing. That's the spec the leaf spring crowd always said you couldn't have both ways. And here's why that argument existed in the first place. A leaf spring is beautiful in its stupidity. It's the spring, the axle locator, and half the suspension geometry in one stack of steel. It costs nothing, and it carries enormous weight without complaint. The price you pay is that an unladen, leaf-sprung Ute skips and shudders over broken bitumen like a shopping trolley, because the spring rate that carries a ton is miles too stiff for an empty tray. A multi-link coil rear separates those jobs. The coil handles the springing, the links handle the locating, so the engineers can tune ride comfort and load carrying independently instead of compromising both. That's the whole trick, and it's why the U9 empty rides like something far more expensive. On top of that, you get a power tailgate with a built-in fold-down step, a hatch between the cab and the tub so you can slide long gear through, and a cabin with dual 12.3-inch displays. Pricing starts in the low 50s and undercuts the equivalent Ranger by a wide margin, and even sneaks under its own LDV cousin at the entry point. Where does this make the big two look weak? Ride quality, rear suspension, sophistication, and standard kit for the money. The Ranger's party trick was always that it drove better than a Ute should. The U9 goes straight at that with more advanced rear suspension than any Ranger short of the Raptor. The caveat here is that independent rear ends put more joints and bushes in the load path, more parts that wear, and this exact setup hauling Aussie loads on Aussie corrugations is an experiment we're all watching in real time. Number 4, the Kia Tasman. This one is interesting for a completely different reason, so stay with me. On paper, the Tasman doesn't murder the HiLux, it merely matches it. The 2.2-litre turbo diesel makes 154 kilowatts and 441 newton meters. Through a quick shifting 8-speed auto, it tows 3,500 braked, and it does the 1-ton thing. Line those figures against the HiLux, and it's a points decision, not a knockout. So why is it here? 2 reasons. First, the cabin. Almost every road tester in the country has said some version of the same sentence, that the Tasman has the best interior in the Ute class, full stop. Huge, genuinely clever storage, proper tech, comfortable for a family in a way no HiLux has ever been. It swept praise in the major comparison tests through 2026, with judges calling the cabin by far the best in the business, and Kia backs it with a 7-year warranty. Second reason, and this is the one that puts money in your pocket. Australians took one look at the styling and stayed away. Kia wanted 20,000 sales a year and is tracking at a quarter of that. So in May, Kia did the thing car makers hate doing. It cut prices, and not gently, up to $15,000 off some variants. Think about what that means. A brand new 7-year warranty Ute with the best cabin in the class, engineering benchmarked against the segment leaders, suddenly discounted to clearance money because people don't like its face. Meanwhile, Toyota raised HiLux prices by up to 10 grand for the same engine as before. One of those trucks is weak value, and it isn't the ugly one. The caveat is honest and small. The engine is adequate rather than mighty, and if the Ute stays a slow seller, resale will feel it. But as a buy today with your own money proposition, the Tasman is one of the sharpest deals in the country. Number 3, the GWM Cannon Alpha PHEV. Right now we leave diesel country entirely, because from here on the list stops being about matching the HiLux and starts being about lapping it. The Cannon Alpha PHEV pairs a 2.0-litre turbo petrol with an electric motor and a 37.1 kilowatt-hour battery for a combined 300 kilowatts and 750 newton meters. That's exactly double the HiLux's power. It's more torque than the Ranger V6 by 150 newton meters. And unlike some electrified Utes, GWM refused to give up the tradie numbers because it still tows 3,500 kilos braked, still has low range and locking diffs, and weighs 800 millimeters, deeper than a standard HiLux. It'll do up to about 110 kilometers on electricity alone, which for most people is the whole working week without burning a drop. It fast charges from 30 to 80% in 26 minutes, and it has vehicle to load, so the Ute becomes a generator running your tools or your campsite off the traction battery. All from around $61,490 drive away at launch pricing, backed by a 7-year warranty with 8 years on the battery. And the battery engineering deserves a mention, because this is where a lot of people assume corners get cut. The pack is rated IP67, which in plain terms means GWM had to prove it survives half an hour fully submerged in a meter of water. That's what earns the 800mm weighting claim. And the company says it's tested the system from minus 40 degrees up to plus 50, which covers everything from an alpine winter to a marble bar summer. Whether it all holds up for 15 years is a question only time answers, but it isn't a parts bin afterthought either. Someone engineered this properly. To get near this capability from Ford, you're looking at the Ranger PHEV at $71,990 before on-roads, and it only makes 207 kilowatts. The engineers at GWM looked at the segment's 3 commandments: tow 3.5 tons, carry a ton, run a diesel, and worked out you only actually need 2 of them. The caveat is the 3rd commandment. All that battery weighs a lot, and payload lands at 685 kilograms, which is well short of a ton. If your Ute lives at max GVM every day, that number rules it out. If it doesn't, you just doubled your power for HiLux SR5 money. Number 2, the BYD Shark 6. This is the truck that broke the market open, so let's give it its due. 1.5-litre turbo petrol, 2 electric motors, 1 on each axle, combined output 321 kilowatts and 650 newton meters, 0 to 100 in 5.7 seconds. That is more than double the power of a HiLux. In a dual cab that started at 57,900 plus on roads, and Australians understood the maths immediately because more than 18,000 of them bought one in 2025 alone, making it the fourth best-selling ute in the country in its first full year, with one body style and basically one trim. No nameplate has ever done that here. It did it while breaking every rule. No diesel, no low range, 2,500 kilo, towing instead of 3,500 on that launch model. And it didn't matter because for the majority of ute buyers who tow a tinny and a box trailer, 2.5 tons covers it, and 100 kilometers of electric range covers the commute. And BYD hasn't stood still. There's now a cheaper dynamic cab chassis from $55,900 for the tradies, and a Shark 6 Performance with a 2.0-litre engine lifting outputs to 350 kilowatts and 700 newton meters, 0 to 100 in 5.5 seconds, in a ute. The mechanism worth understanding is why this layout works. With a motor on each axle, there's no tail shaft, no transfer case, no mechanical connection front to rear at all. The petrol engine mostly acts as a generator, spinning at its most efficient speed to feed the battery, and the motors do the pushing. Fewer rotating parts in the driveline than the truck it replaced, and instant torque at 0 RPM, which is why a 2,800 kilo ute leaves the lights like a hot hatch. Double wishbone coil suspension at both ends means it rides like an SUV, and the vehicle-to-load system turns the tray into a worksite powerboard, running saws and fridges and camp lights off the drive battery. That last feature alone converted a lot of tradies who'd never once thought about electrification because it replaced a $2,000 generator they were already carrying. The caveats are real though. The launch car's 2.5-ton towing is a genuine limit for the caravan crowd. There's no low range for the serious off-road folk. And when your ute is fundamentally a computer, its long-term story depends on BYD still caring about that computer in 15 years. That's not a small question. But weak is the one word nobody can pin on it. And number one, the JAC Hunter VHV. Here's the truck I opened the video with, and I want you to sit with the numbers one more time, because they still don't look real to me. 2-litre turbo petrol, an electric motor on each axle, combined output 360 kilowatts and 1,010 newton meters. 1,010. The new HiLux makes 500. This makes more torque than twin-turbo diesel V8 Land Cruisers made in a dual cab ute, and it's priced from $49,988 before on-roads. That makes it simultaneously the cheapest plug-in hybrid ute in Australia and the most powerful ute in its class, undercutting the Shark 6 Dynamic by about $6,000 while outmuscling the Shark 6 Performance and costing $22,000 less than Ford's Ranger PHEV, which makes barely more than half its power. And before you say cheap Chinese ute, unproven, look at what JAC actually did, because this is the part that impressed me. They hired a former Holden engineer, Michael Barber, to run a local program, put the thing through more than 100,000 kilometres of Australian testing, towing, load work, heat, corrugations, retuned the dampers for our roads, and implemented every recommendation he made. It tows the full 3,500 kilos braked. Payload is 915 kilograms, nearly a working tonne, despite the 31.2 kilowatt-hour battery. Around 100 kilometres of electric-only range, over 1,000 Ks combined, a 5-star ANCAP rating, and a 7-year warranty that covers commercial use. First deliveries are landing right about now, August 2026. The caveat is the honest one. JAC's first attempt, the diesel T9, was underdone, and the brand is still proving it deserves your trust. But on paper, this is the single biggest gap between price and capability the Australian ute market has ever seen, and it points in exactly the opposite direction to the HiLux, which asks more money every year for the same 2015 engine. Now here's the part that actually matters, because you might be sitting there asking the obvious question. If these trucks are this strong on paper, why does the HiLux still outsell almost all of them? And the honest answer is that some of it is earned and some of it is bought, and you need to know which is which. The earned part is real, and I'll never pretend it isn't. Toyota's dealer network reaches towns these new brands have never heard of. HiLux resale value is the best in the business, and resale is real money, yours coming back to you. And that 2.8 diesel is old precisely because it's proven, because every failure mode it has is known, documented, and fixable by any mechanic on the continent. That is worth something. But here's the part that's bought. There is no money for the established players in you doing the comparison I just did. Toyota makes its margin on the assumption that you'll walk in, say HiLux, and sign the same way your old man did. That assumption is worth thousands of dollars per truck. And it's exactly why the price could rise up to 10 grand this generation while the engine stayed identical. They're not charging you for engineering. They're charging you for certainty, for the badge, for the fact that you didn't look sideways. Walk through who collects. The dealer collects because a buyer who never cross shops, never haggles, and the difference between a negotiated price and a sticker price on a 70 grand truck is dinner table money for a year. The finance arm collects because the bigger the drive-away number, the bigger the loan and the bigger the interest over 5 years, and the finance desk makes money whether the truck is good or not. The accessories counter collects because the badge premium buyer is the same buyer who says yes to the $2,000 tube liner and the branded floor mats. And the resale story partly sustains itself because HiLuxes hold value because everyone believes HiLuxes hold value, which is a fine system right up until enough people stop believing it at once. Meanwhile, every one of these challenger brands has to buy its way onto your shortlist with longer warranties, more metal, more kit, and more kilowatts per dollar, because that's the only currency a newcomer has. There's no conspiracy in any of this. It's just quiet commercial logic. A market leader's laziest years are always the ones right before real competition arrives, and you're watching the exact moment the laziness stopped being free. And that's really the thing I want to leave rattling around in your head. A spec sheet is not a truck, but it is a mirror. And for the first time in decades, it's showing the establishment something unflattering. Good engineering is honest. It shows up as numbers. You can measure, torque, payload, warranty years, dollars. And for a long time, the deal in this segment was that you paid the big brands a premium for peace of mind, and nobody checked the math too closely. That deal only stays fair while somebody's checking. The newcomers are far from perfect, and half the caveats I gave you today are versions of the same sentence. We don't know yet. But an unknown truck at 50 grand with a 7-year warranty and double the torque is a question. And a known truck at 70 grand with an 11-year-old engine is now an answer that has to justify itself. Whichever badge ends up in your driveway, you win either way, because competition is the only force on earth that ever made a car maker sharpen its pencil. So here's what I want you to do with all this. Don't buy any Ute, theirs or Toyotas, off this video. Do the comparison the market leaders are betting you won't. Write down your actual numbers first. What do you really tow? In kilos, not in feelings? What payload do you actually carry? How far is your daily run? Because if it's under about 90 Ks, a plug-in Ute costs almost nothing to fuel. Then price the truck honestly, drive away against drive away, never sticker against sticker, and put a dollar figure on the warranty gap. Because 2 extra years of coverage on a $50,000 machine is not a small number. Check the dealer map for your postcode, because a great truck with no dealer within 400 kilometers is not a great truck for you. Ask about parts availability, panels and glass included, and ask your insurer for a quote before you sign anything, not after. And if you're looking at any of the plugins, check the payload after you've added the bull bar, the canopy, and the toolboxes, because batteries eat payload and accessories finish the job. Do that honestly, and one of two things happens. Either you find a newcomer that fits your life and save 10 or 20 grand, or you buy the HiLux anyway, but you buy it knowing exactly what the badge cost you with your eyes open. Both of those outcomes beat sleepwalking into a dealership. Now it's your turn, and I genuinely want to hear this one. Tell me in the comments, would you actually put 50 grand of your own money on one of these new brands? Or does the badge still win, and why? Tell me what you tow, what you drive now, and if you've already jumped to a Shark or a Cannon or a Terron, tell the rest of us what it's actually been like to live with, the service department included, because 1,000 real owners in the comments are worth more than every press launch ever held. I read every single one of these, and those replies are half the reason I keep making them. If this saved you from paying the badge tax blind, subscribe, because next time I'm going the other way entirely. I'm looking at the Utes with the worst resale value in Australia, the ones losing owners $20,000 or more in 3 years, and the number 1 is a badge most people still call bulletproof. That one's going to sting. Until then, remember the spec sheet is where the truth starts, not where it ends. Go check the numbers before the numbers check you.